little girl, I'm gonna hire you when you graduate from college. And I said, sure. But he did. I worked 2 years teaching school at Findlay, and then I got an invitation to come for an interview, to be interviewed, to work for the Social Security Administration. And while there, I worked, I held positions as a field rep, service rep, assistant manager was my last one, but I was also the manager in Union City, Tennessee. And after 44 years and 3 months with the Social Security Administration, I decided I was going to retire. But the good Lord said different. I'm raising 3 boys. Yep. And they're in 3 different schools. And I presently volunteer in the schools. So if you don't catch me on the phone, Kathryn, I'm probably at one of the schools volunteering. And then whenever Kathryn sends me a note, I try to be present, and she and Lee keep me on track. I can say that Dyer County has been good to me. There were some things, as I was explaining to a gentleman who's not here, who's a teacher at the high school in Newbern. You take what you have and you move from there. You don't dwell on the past and say it could have been, it should have been, or it would have been. You take what you have and say, I'm gonna make the most of it. So Dyer County, Dyersburg has been good to me, and I can't say enough about the educators and those who have come along to make a difference. People who have come back from the migration, those who stayed away, but they filter some of their money this way. We appreciate it, and I appreciate what Dyer County has done for me and my family. I'm married to a wonderful man from Crockett County, and he keeps me busy, honey-do. So with 3 boys and 1 husband, you know, it's kind of like I'm outvoted. That's how I got to be in Dyer County. I just was born here.
Thank you very much. Now, I've noticed that many of you have already touched on, and thank you, touched on some of the answers to questions that you'll see later on in your program. So I want to jump over to one in particular. It looks like the 4th one down. As I was giving an overview of the Great Migration, of course, I touched on quite a few different challenges that people experienced when they did move north, both social and economic. So I would like to hear from the panelists. If your family moved out of the South, or if you did yourself, did you experience any of these challenges that I touched on, that the nation was seeing across the board? What sort of differences did you notice?
For me, myself, I was born in 1960, so I didn't see a lot of the things that a lot of other people saw and everything. I didn't experience a lot of that. Sure, when I was growing up, you couldn't go to Dairy Queen, for example. You could go up to the window and order. That's not what we could do. We could have to go to the back door, knock on the door, and someone would come and take your order and hand you your burgers in the back and everything. That was just the way of life. You know, we lived in the country. We had our own animals. We didn't buy anything from the store, per se, because everybody lived in the country and you lived off of the land. You grew your garden just like everybody else. You had a canning room. You had killing season whenever you slaughtered the animals and everything, and you put food away for the winter. That was just the way of life for me. So a lot of times I just didn't experience a lot of things, or else I was just sheltered from it.
Well, for me, I'll talk about my mom and my stepfather. Shortly after she returned from Memphis, they moved to Evansville, Indiana. During their stay here, about the only work they could do was pick cotton or work in other people's homes, my mother. When they moved to Evansville, they had a big economics change for them. My stepdad was a mechanic. And moving to Evansville, you had a big black population and had a lot of black people that had good jobs. So he was able to make a lot of money as a mechanic. My mother worked for Whirlpool, so she had a job. So economically, they were a lot better off by moving to Evansville, Indiana.
My parents were still pretty young when they moved because, as I said before, they married young and had been farmers. My folks had land out in Millsville, both on both sides, and were self-supporting, just as you were saying, raised their own food and so forth. When my father went to the Army and came back, that was a huge experience for him. Not one that he talked enough about, as far as I'm concerned. And I'd say to the young people, oh man, I wish that I had asked many more questions. I wish I'd recorded more. I wish that I had much more information, but I do know that that when he came back, even with the difference between living on a farm and being fairly self-sufficient and having to experience the small town, life, Jim Crow still felt. And in particular, and many of you might know, veterans, young men coming back in uniform to the South were particular targets. They had experienced the world. They had. My father came back with just not the honors that Larry came back with, but with some honors, and they were perhaps, I don't know, either feared or resented, but it was very, very difficult. And so, but when they moved out, my mother had not finished high school. My father had finished high school. So when they moved north to Chicago, finding good jobs wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but they did find work. And nevertheless, some of the same issues of racism were felt in the North. It was just in a different format, and they experienced that. My mother had a great difficulty finding work that where as a matter of fact, she told me, and this is the blunt, honest truth that some people may be uncomfortable with, but she went to one interview and to work for a family in their home, and the man in the home said, part of your duties will be once a week to sleep with me, and she, being in the North, had the option to say no and not take that job. That kind of aggressiveness in the South wasn't always an option, as we look back in our history. But at any rate, my father got a job on the railroad, and that was very good news. That was a major opportunity. He worked very, very hard as a brakeman on the railroad, and for many, many years. And then my mother got a job in a factory, which was very good news, and it had a union eventually, and that was very good news. And so they were able to, between the two of them, and sometimes more than one job, to have a very good life. The experience of the difficulties because of race that they escaped in the South, again, they experienced in the North, but it was just different. And it continued, I remember, I'm quite a lot older than you are, but I remember going to a school that was very fully integrated, and what an interesting perspective that was. My parents weren't used to that, and They were always wondering, how are we doing? Well, we actually, as kids, did very well. But in the 60s, that all changed. You know, there was that white flight, and because schools were supported by property tax, you know, many opportunities then changed. I grew up with parents who were they were very astute about what was happening to them because of their race, and taught us very, very well about, you know, how to be cautious and what to observe and so forth. One of the organizations that I worked with as a youngster, I really, I think it was because of my parents that I became an activist and kind of a radical, you know, and they feared for me, but they greatly encouraged it too. One of the organizations that I worked with was the Woodlawn Organization. Has anyone ever heard of TWO? Young folks, Google that, and Google Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky is the person who began it, a white Jew who had extremely strong concerns for what black folks in Chicago were going through, and he was quite a radical and quite an atheist too. I met him once, but but nonviolent, and he said we'll work through the money, you know. So through that organization, I was involved in demonstrations and you know, sit-ins and that sort of thing. And we would go to neighborhoods or go to apply for a job after having sent in an application or perhaps called and being welcome to come to interview or welcome to come to apply to look at an apartment. And then when we get there, you know, we'd be told, oh, I'm so sorry, it's just been taken, you know, it's just been filled. And then because we did it in partnership, you know, we were organized, a white couple or white family would go afterward, and then they would get it, and then we'd take them to court. So, and it was working like that was very, very effective. I remember after a particular suit was filed that Marshall Fields and Company in Chicago opened their doors finally to employ some blacks, and I was one of them in the accounting department, working side by side with interesting people of all races. But anyway, so what was the question I'm answering? we're all getting a little, I think, sidetracked on our responses.
It's easy to on a subject like this.
Yeah, the experience of the economic and social differences. Yeah. There was always something to talk about. You know, my parents did not know anything about what it would be like or what it could be like for me to go to a school that was integrated. And you know, as a very young child, I'd come home in the new year. Is your teacher white or black? Let's see. I don't know. How can you not know? You know, well, because I didn't pay attention to that. You know, maybe depending on the way someone looked, and so. But I remember that they were, because of their experience in the South and the things that they experienced in the North, very race conscious, and of course that continues today. One of the many places that I lived was in New England, and you know, I'm talking about the early early 2000, was it 2001? And again, calling and talking to someone about a position that was available, and when I get there, it's, oh, it's you, or the one I talked to. Oh, yeah. We still have work to do, right? Amen.
All right, well, and again, I want to be considerate of everyone's time, so I'm going to take the last two questions and sort of swoosh them together. So, and perhaps I might actually start with Ms. Fields. First of all, to the panel, do you have family currently, or extended family currently living in the northern areas, in the western, midwestern areas, and are they considering moving to the south? That question definitely is the other side of this coin. So we have this migration, and then in the 70s, things start to slow down, and then in the 80s, things start to turn back around. And so now we have African Americans moving into, not necessarily rural South, moving into the urban new South because of economic opportunities and coming back to your roots, perhaps family. So do you have family living in northern areas considering moving back? Why? Why not? And speaking of those northern family members, a very common story is about all the frequent visitations growing up between Dyer County and the northern family members, spending weekends, spending summers. Do you have memories that along those lines?
Well, of course, I still have family members living in the north, but I don't think that the younger blacks are moving back as fast as the older generation, because they want to come back to retire, because this is a slower pace of life in the South. It's slower, and things need to change some more, but they have changed a lot. And so I think the older generation is moving back for retirement purposes and to say, you know, this really is home. But still, the younger people are there, and the way the situation is with drugs in the bigger cities, smaller towns, I know we have it, but we don't have as much to deal with, and I think we feel, as an older generation, we feel safer to a point, not completely. And I do believe that people tend to forget that not all of the blacks in the South back in the day lived on farms. Some of us lived in the city, if you want to call it that. We lived in the city, and it was just a community that had a store or two, the school, the churches, and everybody lived together. Everybody knew everybody's mother and father and child, and if I'm gonna get a beating by my mother, I'm gonna get a beating by your mother too, because that's the way, it was a community thing. But yet we still experience the farm-like work, such as chopping cotton and picking cotton. And no, we didn't live out on the farm where we could get up and get dressed and go. We had to get up early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and catch a truck and ride the truck. Oh yes, and ride the truck to pick cotton. Some of you remember it. Pick cotton, chop cotton. You got on a truck and it was cold. It was very cold, and then it'd get warm. So no, there were city blacks, so to speak, and that's how we lived. We lived in communities like that. And then we would look at those who had gone up north and came back with the nice cars and nice clothes, and we thought they were doing well, but we knew that everybody could not go up north. Somebody had to stay down south. So some of us, we stayed. And that was the kind of work. Our parents did the same kind of work. My mother was a domestic. She cleaned houses. She cleaned office buildings. My father worked in a dry goods store, Graber's by the way. And we as children had to do the same thing. We didn't have part-time jobs at McDonald's or anything. There was no McDonald's. We didn't have part-time jobs like that. We had jobs where we, during the seasonal months, we could chop cotton and pick cotton and those kinds of things. And we didn't go to school like we go. We'd get out of school to chop cotton. If you remember, those of you who sharecropped and you know, we got out of school early to pick cotton and chop cotton, and then we'd go back. And I don't mean early during the day. It was like a month or two. We did things like that. So those that lived in the city, yeah, we had a different way of life than those out in the country, but the meat came with the killing of the cows and the hogs and things like that. And we bartered a lot, you know, we exchanged a lot. So we had some of the same things that the county had or the rural had, but then we had a lifestyle of community in that everybody in that community, and it was just You know, it wasn't big like we had the east side and the west side. And all those on the west side, we just knew each other. We all went to church. We didn't go to the same church, but we all went to church. You know, every Sunday, you know where everybody was. They were at church. There was no place else to go. And if you did wrong, you got chastised by everybody in the community. So that was the way it was in the city side of the blacks being down south. But yes, we saw the good things that came out of the north, the money, the cars, and things like that. But we knew what we had here. It was a way of life. And sometimes you look back and you say, well, didn't you feel mad or didn't you get angry? Yes, we did, but then we also knew this was the way it was until something changed. And change does come. It may not come as fast as we want to, but it will come.
And for me, I still got family living in the north right now. They're living on the East Coast in Baltimore, Maryland. I have a sister that's an executive for the University of Maryland. I got a father that's retired from Baltimore Transit. And then my stepmother is retired from an oncology lab in Baltimore, where she was an oncologist lab supervisor for like 44 years. They both retired. She had never seen Tennessee. My father hadn't been to Tennessee since he met my mother in 1959, so both of them visited back in July for the first time. They came to Dyersburg, and he saw how everything had changed from 1959 to 2018. I don't think he'd ever live here again. You know, he's too used to the convenience of everything, but he lives one of these guarded type lives where everything's gotta be safe type. And I don't think he'll ever change for that though. He'll probably die in Baltimore sooner or later, but I just don't think he could ever come back down. My sister visits every year. Have a brother lives out in Colorado Springs. He doesn't ever come back. Plus I have two sisters living here right now. They're probably never leaving. And I've lived 14 different countries. I came back here, so I'm gonna die here too.
Well, for me, my immediate family, which was on my mother's side, all of my grandmother's kids migrated north except for two. That was Charlotte Galden, she's my aunt, she works at Citizen Bank. And I had an aunt named Doretha that ended up staying here. So I have a lot of people up north, but they're their kids, and I can't even start to name them. I have one uncle that is still in Gary, Indiana, and I really feel that he's only there because he married a lady that was born and raised in Gary. I couldn't wait to come back home. Next question was family visits. My family is a very tight family. They had family reunions every year for probably 20 years. So the family would get together every year. After that, we made it every 2 years, and it still goes on today. We have it all over the United States. We have it in Gary, Indiana, Flint, Michigan, Phoenix, Arizona, just to name a few places. And we've had it in Dyersburg about 5 times. So my family was very close, and we get together a lot.
As I said before, that we've been from here for generations. So out in the little church down in Millsville, behind the church is buried bunches and bunches of relatives that go back to the 1800s, way back. Now, many of us have begun to passed away, you know, getting a lot older. I have a brother in Chicago, a brother in where is he? Upstate New York. I have a niece in LA, and I don't think any of them plan to come to Tennessee. No, not at all. The bulk of the family, I think, who would intend to be back are already back. I have my father's only surviving brother is living in Milwaukee, and that's the other place where, you know, the Great Migration went to Milwaukee and Chicago, and he, in fact, was he and his wife went early to Chicago, to Milwaukee, and that was the route and the sort of place where folks could go, stay with them for a year, get a job, you know, and get them on their feet in that way. I have children in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, some of the places I've lived, and surprise, surprise, when my daughter decided to move to Dyersburg. It's wonderful, unusual, I think, as we all know, but it's been great because she didn't, you know, she wasn't born here. Speaking of the visiting, though, one of the things that I remember, and I want to say this quickly because I know we're running out of time, is that having, I don't suppose it's still possible, but having a job with the railroad, we get free passes. Much of the family would get free passes, and my father and mother would often say, "We're going to go home this weekend." Now, of course, I'm a little kid in Chicago, right? And I'm thinking, "Home? Wait a minute, aren't we home?" But we'd hop on the train. There used to be a train station right here in Dyersburg, wasn't there? And hop on the train and come down. They were back and forth constantly. I spent summers here, visiting quite a lot. So I felt like, even though I did not grow up in Dyersburg, in this area, I felt like I knew quite a lot about it. So it was, when my parents finally, after about 65 years, because when they left, of course, they said, "We'll never come back to the conditions that they had to live under." But after a long, long time, because of some of the things that have been shared already, they wanted to come back, and they loved the land, they loved the country. It was just a wonderful, you know, and I'm just so glad that they had the chance to spend the last 15 or so years of their lives back here enjoying it. And then I followed them back to help take care of them. I'm one of the only daughter in the family, so you know how that goes.
Thank you very much. So I think at this time now, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to all of you now. If we have just a couple minutes for any burning questions that you'd like to pose to our panel. I do know, unfortunately, Ms. Fields does need to step out. Doesn't. No. All four will be available to answer any questions that you might have. Is there anything that you'd like to pose to the panel?
I'm just curious about the difference as you would see it, and particularly as your folks would have seen religious experiences here versus the new place.
My experience with moving to Flint, I was baptized in Flint. My aunt was a Christian, very religious, and when she found out that I hadn't been baptized, she just had a fit. She carried me to church, and I was baptized in Flint.
My parents and their parents were Cumberland Presbyterians, and my experience visiting, as I said, we come many times for, you know, in the summer and so forth. I can still picture it. It was a very sedate affair, you know. You'd go into the church, and the usher with the gloves on would tell you to be quiet and have a seat, and people, it was very quiet. People paid attention, and well, not that I've been to a church where they haven't paid attention, but it was a very somber experience. Very moving, but very somber. when my folks went to Chicago, there were no Cumberland Presbyterians, because it's a Southern-based denomination, but both the, there are two of them, one white, one black. Both of them are Southern-based. And at that time, in the late 40s, when they moved, there were no Cumberlands of any sort there. So they went where their friends were, and their friends who were laborers with them on the railroad or in the factories were Pentecostal folks. Not that you have to be a laborer to be Pentecostal, but so the church experience was very, very different. It was very, very lively, very energetic, but it was so interesting to me to notice that. And thank you for your question, because it's been a fascination for me that there's quite a diversity and acceptance of various worship styles within their church, within their group. My parents would sit still. A tear may fall and an arm may wave, but while other people were jumping around and experiencing the full Pentecostal experience. But my folks worshiped like Cumberland Presbyterians in a Pentecostal setting.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Yes.
I would just like to address Emma, because I believe we went to high school together. I had classes with you. I was Barbara Tucker. And I've always treasured the fact that I knew you. I knew Savella a little, but I'd always treasured the fact that you were a friend of mine. You were one of the first 4 that integrated Dyersburg High School. And I've shared a lot of stories through the years with people that have asked me about the school situation and integration, and it was just a real treasure to me that you were one of the first 4 and you were my friend.
Anyone else? Other questions?
Ms. Fields, I believe you were the one that mentioned the urban renewal that took place. Is that,
Yeah.
I think it was late 50s.
60s.
There was a,
Well, they have started before then.
I think 57 is when the program came out.
I was a little bit young then.
There was actually what they called a Dyersburg model. This was one of the test areas, I believe, for urban renewal when they first started talking about it. But I don't really know how to ask you any other way than just if you have any memories of what took place and how that went about. Could you expand on that?
I know that when urban renewal came, it took away a lot of the neighborhood as we knew it, but it provided housing that many blacks were not ever able to experience. For instance, where lots of us lived, there was no indoor plumbing. We had outside bathrooms. We had to bring the water in and put it in a tub and take a bath. But when urban renewal came through and they built the projects, wow, that was something, Not one bathroom, because my family was big. We had the biggest project across town. It was 7 children. And we had a bathroom, The only bathroom I had really seen was when I went with my mom to help her clean houses. So urban renewal exposed us to some of the everyday living things that we had not been exposed to before, We did not have running water in the house as such that you could go and turn on the faucet and get a glass of water. You had to go outside, down the road get a hydrant with a water bucket, y'all know what I'm talking about, and bring it back to the house, and you drank out of a dipper, you had a dipper. So there were a lot of things that because of urban renewal, we got to experience that helped not only our standard of living, but let us see how other people live. So I think, although I didn't like to see our neighborhoods destroyed, I called it destroyed, but where we lived, those houses were really, they weren't fit to be lived in, but that's where we lived, you know. You could see the ground when you looked down at the floor, there was no carpet, that's just how we lived. So when urban renewal came through, wow, this is a big difference, this is a change, you know. 7 children and 5 bedrooms, whereas before there were 7 children and 2 bedrooms. Give me a break, it was nice. Running water, heat, air, yes. Yeah, so urban renewal was great, it really was.
Thank you very much, that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to ask you more questions about that later. Goodness. Other questions from the audience? No? All right, well then in that case, so for those of you who can and are interested, as I've been saying, we have some fantastic volunteers in the back. We have Trey, John, Lexi, Susanna, Reed. I think I got them all. Yes, there they are. So you may have noticed, of course, oh no, I'm sorry, ignore that. I'm talking about some other document. But they have a form where they can take your information. So if you cannot stay tonight, but you would like to discuss these same questions that the panel has, please, please, please stop by and speak to one of the volunteers, give them your contact information. If you know of someone that you want to volunteer to answer these questions, stop by a volunteer and give them their contact information. Because of course I want to remind you, obviously, that we are here, the public library and the Historical Society are here for you. Literally, the public library is your library. It literally is. You have purchased it. You've paid for it with your tax dollars. That is where our funding comes from. Not from state and federal, but rather from tax dollars here in local Dyersburg and Dyer County. So we want to hear from you, which is why we have volunteers here to capture your stories. And I also, of course, want folks to just fill out those surveys, leave them right there. You don't need to hand them in, we'll come and collect them. If you don't need a pen, if you don't have a pen, excuse me, one of the volunteers can provide that for you. I want to thank you again so very much for coming. It's been a wonderful evening. Appreciate you very much.